If there was one kingdom of life that embodied the free market best, it would be fungus, without question. And I know a lot of people think it's really scary because of the video game and now the show, The Last of Us, and the whole scary cordyceps fungus, which does infect insects' brains and then grows through it. But the truth of the matter is that instead of fungus destroying all life on the planet, it's the reason why we have any of it on land. The reason why you have beer, booze, bread, and anything like bread comes from a fungus called yeast. Hundreds of millions, if not over 1 billion lives have been saved by the first true mass-produced antibiotic, which is penicillin, and that comes from a form of fungus called mold. But the overall craziest thing is that all farming on the planet is only possible because of fungus. The reason why we can grow wheat, rice, or anything that comes up out of the ground is because we can plant a seed in healthy soil. Well, that soil is only made healthy because of something called mycelium, which breaks down the soil, and it's been doing this for almost 1 billion years, maybe longer. The fungus doesn't just break down what's in the dirt to make soil, it actually has a relationship with the plants as well. 90% of all plants rely on having some kind of relationship with fungus just to survive. It's one of the most beautiful forms of symbiosis, where the plant grows, takes root, and the fungus will grow around the roots, sometimes even penetrating the plant's cell walls, just to be able to distribute nutrients better to the plant. Fungus provides easily broken down and crucial minerals to the tree, and the tree or the plant provides starch as a form of energy. So yeah, fungus is an incredibly beautiful thing, and I'm going to talk a lot more about it. Fungus is one of the oldest kingdoms of life, older than plants and animals, and I know a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that fungus is like a plant or even a plant, but no, fungus is actually much more closely related to animals than plants. And fungus is older than plants by at least 300 to 500 million years old. But another crazy fact is 400 to 500 million years ago, there were no trees, but there were forests all over the earth. And guess what? They were made of fungus. There were mushroom forests towering between 20 to 25 feet. And you might be thinking, mushrooms, well, aren't those a kind of fungus? No, they're not. Mushrooms are just a flower of the fungus. Fungus forms a network of these tiny tendrils called mycelium, and they can expand 50 feet to several miles. All the fungus is their version of a flower. It just grows up, pops up, and releases the spores that either get carried away by the wind or the water. So that means every time you see 1 or 2 mushrooms in one spot in the ground, they are just a small piece of a huge network of the actual organism. You might be thinking, well, what happened to these giant mushroom forests? Well, these were able to grow because there were no such thing as trees, and there were also much smaller animals, so they had less competition necessary to thrive. And it's only because of fungus like this that animals and plants were able to survive, because of how the fungus manipulated the dirt, and the fungus did provide a good food source for all forms of life. Before fungus came into the picture, all we had for billions of years was just bacteria, viruses, and protists. And those 3 kingdoms of life were unicellular, meaning that they were just one-celled organisms. And I know a lot of people don't consider viruses to be a kingdom of life because we don't even really know if viruses are alive, but please just bear with me. 1 billion or 1.5 billion years ago, fungus comes along, and they are the first form of multicellular life, meaning life consisting of just more than one cell. And fungus was the first form of multicellular life that started colonizing all of the land. And it grew on anything it could get any kind of nutrients from, including rocks. That's right, fungus broke down rocks and turned the rocks into dirt. It also broke down anything that died, like algae, the simplest of plants, the simplest of animals, because remember, this is before trees. It was this hundreds of millions of years of fungus cultivating the land for plants and animals and other forms of life to grow on. Fungus is closer to being an animal than being a plant. Plants can make their own food in the form of photosynthesis, at least most of them. But fungus, just like animals, they have to get their food from an external source. Plants store energy in the form of starch, but both fungus and animals store it in the form of glycogen. Now, both plants and fungus have something called a cell wall, like a protective layer. The plants are made of cellulose, but fungi, or fungi, whatever you want to call it, their cell wall is made of something called chitin. Chitin is the same stuff that makes up the exoskeletons of insects. When it comes to the genetic relation, fungi are closer to animals than plants, and animals are closer to fungi than plants. Plants communicate through hormones. So if a leaf gets pulled at the top of the tree, it sends a hormone all the way through the tree, maybe even to other trees that something happened. But fungus communicates the same way our nervous system does, through electrical impulses. Remember, like I said earlier in the post, some of these mycelium networks of fungus can go 50 feet, they could go even several miles, which means one piece of the mycelium that has to communicate will send an electrical impulse all the way through to the entirety of the network. The electrical impulse travels a lot quicker than anything hormonal. This is what baffles mycologists and just overall scientists, because plants, animals, they have a vascular system. We have a circulatory system, and the same way when you water a plant, the water gets transmitted all through the vascularity. But funguses are not vascular, so how on earth are they able to transmit whatever they need? Also, how do they transmit the nutrients if they're not vascular? That's the mycelium I was talking about earlier, and those are just made of these thread-like tubes called hyphae. Just like any other form of life, the hyphae will grow around any area that's very nutrient rich and grow less around areas that don't have much. Fungus will just start to secrete any enzyme it has to in order to digest, and once the material gets to be a little bit more digestible, those tubes, which the hyphae make up, just go throughout the entire network to distribute what has to be done. But for some reason, it's not vascular, for the sheer fact that there are no special tissues used for circulation, and when it comes to any kind of circulation in a vascular system, something has to be pumped in a bulk flow. But what happens with hyphae is that the nutrients are distributed cytoplasmically along the cells. If something bad happens to the soil around plants and the plant has to start moving its root system, it will take days. That's not the case when it comes to fungal hyphae. If the same thing happens to a fungus, it could start moving its mycelium network within minutes, sometimes an hour. That is impossibly quick compared to a plant. You've probably heard of slime molds. Those are considered a fungus-like protist, and they are able to go through mazes. Researchers set up a maze and put a piece of slime mold at the beginning, and they put 2 food sources of oat flakes at either end. First, the slime mold randomly put its little hyphae mycelium network around places to try to navigate where it had to go, but eventually the slime mold consolidated its little vein network and made it to both food sources in the shortest path possible, and other true forms of fungus have done the same thing. And the incredible thing is that most fungus just live to break down things that we don't need anymore, that are dead or even harmful to us. If fungus all of a sudden disappeared from the earth, within 2 to 3 years, everywhere on the planet we would be up to our waist in inorganic and organic waste. We would also most likely be dead because of all the biohazardous material that hasn't been broken down, but also since 90% of plants have some kind of symbiotic relationship with fungus, the plants would die, we would have less oxygen, and we would have just less of a food source. Fun fact, we are finding funguses now that can break down all kinds of waste and plastic, including toxic material. Now, I mentioned symbiosis before, and there is no other kingdom of life that has nailed it better than fungus. Some forms of that would be the lichen that you see growing on trees. The fungus provides structure, moisture, and protection for algae, which provides food for the fungus through photosynthesis. Then there's mycorrhizal symbiosis, which is what I talked about before, where the fungus helps 90% of plants just get their nutrients. Plants are able to break down a lot of what they can because they have healthy gut fungus living inside them, secreting enzymes to break down wood and all those other crazy things. And even humans have a host of healthy fungus living in our gut, our skin, our lungs, you name it, and this keeps us healthy and strong. Now, I mentioned fungus being an ideal for the free market for the sheer fact that in human societies, we tend to aggregate and hoard wealth. Fungal networks know how to concentrate their wealth in the right areas, but they don't hoard it. That's a very plant and animal-like thing. They are highly responsive and adaptable to any changes in the environment, just like a free market economy is, as opposed to more controlled authoritarian ones. Remember that I don't consider America to be a fully free market economy. I think Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, they have a much better grasp on it. And those 3 states have a higher quality of life, a better happiness index, and much less wealth inequality than we do here. I am the Geo Husar, and tell me what else you want to know about fungus. Thanks for watching.